democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're talking to Joshua Green, senior national correspondent for Bloomberg Businessweek. His new book, Devil's Bargain, Steve Bannon's Donald Trump and the Storming of the Presidency. I want to turn to a speech that Steve Bannon delivered via Skype to a conference held inside the Vatican in 2014.
I believe the world, and particularly the Judeo-Christian West, is in a crisis. And it's really the organizing principle of how we built Breitbart News to really be a platform to bring news and information to people throughout the world, principally in the West, but we're expanding internationally, to let people understand the depths of this crisis. And it is a crisis both of capitalism, but really of the underpinnings of the Judeo-Christian West in our beliefs. We are in an outright war against jihadist Islamic fascism. And this war is I think, metastasizing almost far quicker than governments can handle it.
That's Steve Bannon delivering a Skype address to a Vatican conference in 2014. Joshua Green, talk about the religion that informs Steve Bannon's politics.
Well, so we just talked about kind of the newspaper bio of Steve Bannon and the blue-collar background. But the most interesting line of research for this book is Bannon's religious and intellectual biography. And this is a story that hasn't been told, that I go into some detail in the book. But in the course of my reporting, I asked Steve Bannon, I said, you know, when you were at that Vatican conference, and this wasn't just a Vatican conference, it was a group of far, far right conservative traditionalist Catholics. Bannon name-checked a man named Julius Evola, who was an Italian intellectual and Benito Mussolini's fascist ideologist at the beginning of World War II. And I said, Steve, if you're not an anti-Semite and a Nazi and a white supremacist, as you're often charged with being, but you say you're not, why is it that you are familiar with people like Evola? And he said, oh, you know, when I developed my ideas about nationalism, I went back and was looking for an intellectual edifice to kind of inform these ideas. And to find nationalist thinkers, you really have to go back to the 1930s and the 1940s when those ideas were ascendant. But the real guy who influenced me, Bannon told me, was a man named René Guignon, who was Evola's intellectual godfather. Guignon has a fascinating biography. He was born in France in the late 19th century to a Roman Catholic family, practiced occultism, Freemasonry, and later converted to Sufi Islam and observed the Sharia, which is a very unusual guru, it seems to me, for a guy like Steve Bannon, who is so virulently Islamophobic. But Guignon was the founder of a religion, a kind of religious philosophy known as primordial traditionalism. That's capital T traditionalism. And primordial traditionalism holds that there is common spiritual truths, unifying spiritual truths at the heart of ancient religions like the Hindu Vedanta, Sufism, medieval Catholicism, even paganism. And these are original spiritual truths that were revealed to mankind in the earliest ages of the world, but have been lost in the West by the rise of secular modernity. So Bannon, who was raised in a very traditional Catholic family, who went to a right-wing Catholic military high school and has been steeped in this right-wing Western Civ curriculum, believes, as Guignon does, that we are entering a dark age, that the rise of the Enlightenment in the 1500s has led us toward apocalypse, and that if he can't prop up traditional values and do what Guignon had hoped to do, which was to, quote, restore to the West a traditional civilization, then mankind is going to be destroyed. And that is his animating belief.
And I wanted to turn to Julius Evola in his own words, the monarchist and racial theorist who struck an alliance with Benito Mussolini. His ideas became the basis of fascist racial theory. This is Julius Evola speaking with a French filmmaker in 1971 1941 about what he considered the positive aspects of fascism, and in particular, National Socialism, Nazism.
Il y a des côtés valuables, des aspects valuables, des aspects qui...
There are positive and valuable aspects. Those which I could value are the reconstruction of the authority of the state and the idea of overcoming class conflict toward a hierarchical and corporative formation.
Hiérarchique et corporative. Et c'est un certain
to some extent of a military and disciplined style within the nation, in addition to some of their anti-bourgeois proposals. To me, all of that is positive.
That's Julius Evola, one of the people, Steve Bannon.
I'd never seen that clip. So the unifying thread here is that Evola also looked to Guignon for inspiration. Guignon was the godfather of this capital T traditionalist movement. Now, Guignon believed that the way to spiritual transcendence was to basically indoctrinate small groups of important people all over the world, what we would today call influencers. And he was very focused. He believed that if you could push spiritual change, that political change would follow. Evola is the black sheep of the traditionalist family and had a different view. He said, no, we can't just sit back and try and change people's spirituality. We need to go out and change society. So Evola went out and struck an alliance with Benito Mussolini to try and exert power in the Italian government, which he had. He was, as you said, the chief racial theorist for Mussolini. They had a falling out, and Evola later moved on to Hitler and Nazi Germany. What all three of these men have, though, in common is the belief in, at the heart of Guignon's religion was the belief in the Hindu concept of cyclical time, the idea that the world passes through set stages. And Evola believed, as Bannon does, as Guignon does, that we are in what the Hindus call the Kali Yuga, a 6,000-year-long dark age in which man's connection to God and the transcendent is wholly forgotten. So Evola brought these ideas to interwar Europe, to Italy, and tried to change society that way to fight back against it. Bannon has come to this through a kind of populist hard-right politics where through Breitbart and some of these affiliated organizations, he's tried to not only take over American politics, but look at what he's doing in places like the European Union. He's trying to destroy what he would call these globalist edifices, which he believes is a manifestation of the rise of modernity and something that needs to be destroyed to pull us back to a pre-Enlightenment era.
We're talking to Joshua Green. His new book is Devil's Bargain, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storming of the Presidency. You also talk about how Breitbart News went after Fox News to make it more extreme, and the gaming background of Steve Bannon, recognizing that Fox News was for old folks. There was this huge young conservative set that he could bring in.
You know, another story in the book, another thing I got asked about a lot as a political reporter was, where did this idea of the alt-right come from? Who are these people? How did they infect our politics in the way that they had? And Bannon, oddly enough, is a critical figure in the rise of the alt-right. Many of whose members, I should just add as a side note, read and admire Julius Evola in his thinking. But back in 2007, after Bannon had done Hollywood and filmmaking, he wound up for about a year and a half as the CEO of a video game company in Hong Kong, which did not actually make video games that you play. It pioneered something called gold farming, which I had never heard of. But what gold farming is the process of going into these massive multiplayer games like World of Warcraft and winning armor and prizes and gold, which allow you to advance in the game, but then turning around and selling them to people in the real world. So Bannon's company would hire teams of low-wage Chinese workers to play these games in 24-hour rotating cycles, win all this stuff, and then sell it to wealthier gamers offline, which was considered a serious enough business that Goldman Sachs actually invested money in Bannon's company. But what happened was the gamers, most of the people who played the games considered this cheating, and they got very angry. You know, kids would spend hours and weeks and months absorbed in these games and didn't like the fact that there was this shortcut. And so the gamers themselves organized on message boards. There are special message boards devoted to these multiplayer games. And they organized themselves and said, hey, we're going to put pressure on these video games and make them shut down the practice of gold farming. And they did, and it bankrupted Bannon's business. But the lesson he took away from this was that there are millions and millions of young, mostly white men who spend their entire lives in these online alternate realities.
4chan.
And that 4chan, exactly, Reddit, and that if they are motivated to do so, they can be a very powerful political force. They bankrupted my company. I want to see if I can channel them into politics. And when Bannon got to Breitbart News, he hired a notorious internet troll named Milo Yiannopoulos to be Breitbart's tech editor and to essentially entice these legions of angry online gamers into the world of populist right-wing politics. And eventually, Bannon was able to turn them on to Trump.
So you now have Bannon in the White House. His main issues, as he talked about at CPAC, is dismantling the administrative state. Is he succeeding? How powerful is he right now?
He is to an extent, not the extent he'd like to, but when you saw the CPAC clip that you showed of him deconstructing the administrative state, that is a signal that is operating on two levels. If you are an ordinary traditional movement Republican, you don't like government, you want government to shrink, you hear what Bannon said as, we're going to shrink government. But on another level, and this gets back to Guignon and the traditionalists, Bannon is using coded language there which says, deconstructing the administrative state. One of Guignon's beliefs was that there were two pivotal moments in world history that brought us away from God and the transcendent. One was the destruction of the Order of Knights Templar in 1312, which cut off Western connection to esoteric knowledge in the East. The other was the Peace of Westphalia, which gave rise to the modern nation state. That is what Bannon wants to destroy.
Finally, he talks about fake news. He talks about the New York Times as fake news. But he used the New York Times to advance his goals. And that goes to the issue of Clinton cash, et cetera.
Absolutely, yeah. And so I tell the story in the book. Bannon, for all his complaints about the media, is a very savvy guy who understands how to manipulate the mainstream media. And one of the things I thought he did so brilliantly, and I write about in the book, was find a way to get his stories into the New York Times. And so he funded 2 years' worth of research, produced the book Clinton Cash by Peter Schweitzer, which documented all this stuff, all these financial connections, and then brought the book to reporters at mainstream outlets like the Times, like the Post, who took these stories, published them in their papers, and spread this anti-Clinton message in the mainstream media, dissuading and discouraging a lot of Clinton's own voters. And in the end, that proved to be a very effective tactic.
And he also went after Fox News.
Well, he also went after Fox News because Bannon believes that there was a split between populist Republicans and what he would call Fox News establishment Republicans. There's a scene in the book of Bannon screaming profanely at Roger Ailes. Eventually, Bannon won that war, broke the back of Fox News, and now they've become the most pro-Trump station you can find anywhere on the cable dial. Finally,
we have just 30 seconds, but you went to college with Sean Spicer, Josh.
I did go to college with Sean Spicer. I went to Connecticut College, very PC liberal arts school. He was one of about 10 openly Republican kids on campus, very loud about it. His nickname in college was Sean Sphincter, so it gives you an idea of his popularity. But it was surprising to see where he's wound up, but I certainly recognize the guy that I went to college with.
Well, we're going to leave it there. Joshua Green, senior national correspondent for Bloomberg Businessweek. His new book, Devil's Bargain, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, and the Storming of the Presidency. That does it for today's show. If you want to read transcripts, video, or audio podcast, you can go to democracynow.org. You can also sign up for our daily news headlines there. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke, Dina Guzdor, Nermeen Sheikh, Carla Wills, Laura Gaddis-Diener, Sam Malkoff, John Hamilton, Robbie Karen, Honey Masood, Trina Ndura, Andre Lewis, Mike DeFilippo, Miguel Noguera, Paul Huckabee, our engineers. Special thanks to Nicole Salazar. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.